Good evening and thank you for joining us. Thunder Bay's record-setting year for murders continues to get even worse. Police are now investigating the 14th homicide of 2022.
Officers responded to a disturbance call just before midnight last night on the city's north side. The victim, a 37-year-old man whose name is being withheld until next of kin are notified, was found dead inside a residence on the 200 block of Pearl Street. The Major Crimes Unit has determined the death is a homicide. A post-mortem will now be conducted. Detective Sergeant Jason Ryback says he can't speak about potential suspects or a possible motive at this stage in the case.
Again, this is very, very early on in our investigation. I do not believe that this is there's a threat to the public. I believe it's an isolated incident, meaning I believe these people probably know each other that are involved. Having said that, we keep our mind open to any possibility. I will be asking if there's any video in the area, contact our investigators. We get lucky a lot of time with some video. People don't realize what they might have on their home video surveillance systems. And so the smallest little thing may not mean much to them, but it could mean a lot to us tracking the individuals down.
Ryback adds it was not a firearm-related homicide. The 14 murders so far this year are the most in the city's history. Ryback notes these murder investigations are very taxing on police resources.
Police are also investigating an attempted murder after they were called to the hospital around 5:40 this morning regarding a man suffering from a recent gunshot wound. It's believed the initial incident happened near Victoria Avenue and Mark Street. Police are appealing to the public for any surveillance or dash cam footage from the area, specifically on Victoria from Waterloo to Brodie Street between 4:30 to 6 a.m. Anyone with information is encouraged to call police or Crime Stoppers.
OPP now say there's no obvious indication of foul play in the sudden deaths of 3 men at a home in Hudson near Sioux Lookout. Police and EMS were called to the residence just before 1 o'clock last Saturday afternoon, where they discovered 3 occupants with no vital signs. Postmortems were completed in Toronto, but the specific causes of death won't be released at this time. The investigation continues, and police are asking anyone with information to contact Crime Stoppers or Sioux Lookout OPP. Well, the OPP have also released more details about a pair of fatal collisions on area highways yesterday. The first crash happened just west of Ignace around midnight. A transport truck collided with an empty wood chip truck, and one person was pronounced dead at the scene. OPP confirmed today that the victim was a 66-year-old man from Thunder Bay. The other fatal collision occurred around 3:30 yesterday afternoon on the Thunder Bay Expressway. A transport truck collided with a pedestrian just north of the Red River Road intersection. OPP say the deceased was a 43-year-old local man. The northbound lanes were closed for more than 4 hours while police investigated the scene.
Parents in Ontario are preparing for a weekend of uncertainty as a possible strike by education workers looms.
We represent early childhood educators. There's supposed to be 2 adults in every kindergarten class working with our youngest learners. All too often this year, there's 1 adult, a teacher, working with 20 or 25 little ones. Simply impossible to do any real learning there.
More than 50,000 unionized education workers will walk off the job on Monday if a deal isn't reached with the provincial government. Both sides have agreed to a wage increase, but the issue now is staffing levels. Ontario's education minister says while there's an urgent need to get a deal in place, he insists the government has fulfilled its end of the bargain.
We withdrew that legislation. We increased their wages significantly. We've gone to a flat raise. We protected their pensions and benefits and the sick leave that is objectively the best in Canada. And so we are doubling down on all efforts to get a deal. It just requires the union to accept the good proposal before them.
There's some relief on the way for parents who are desperately searching for over-the-counter pain relievers for their kids. More than 1 million bottles are expected to arrive in Canada next week. They can't come fast enough for local pharmacies where the shelves have been empty for months. One Thunder Bay politician believes this is just the latest symptom of a broader disease plaguing Canada's pharmaceutical supply chain. This has become a disturbingly familiar sight for those caring for sick kids. rows of empty shelves where children's pain reliever is supposed to be. John Paul Federico is a pharmacist at Jansen's at Bay and Algoma. He says it's been like this for months.
It's been terrible here. We haven't had any supply of children's acetaminophen and ibuprofen since August.
He's spoken to plenty of desperate parents and caregivers since.
Generally, I've recommended they use the adult tablet and take a fraction of it based on the child's weight, so that should be done with caution, with the advice of their pharmacist.
He's pleased to hear that the government has stepped in. More than 1 million bottles secured from the U.S. and Australia are expected to be available at hospitals, pharmacies, and retailers next week. But even still, Federico says supply will likely be limited.
We'll probably keep it behind the counter to limit the sale to probably one per household.
For us doctors, it was a constant headache.
Former ER doctor turned Liberal MP Marcus Pawlowski believes the children's medication shortage is a one-off driven by the pandemic. But he notes a shortage of other drugs in hospitals has largely gone unseen by the public for years. And he believes countries like Canada need to streamline the regulatory process to get drugs to market more quickly.
Globally, we have to come together to have a reliable mechanism so each country, Canada, the United States, Great Britain, Germany, doesn't have to go through the same regulatory process, that we can say, okay, this was approved and it's been approved by whatever agency that does this, and because they approve it, you can sell it in Canada.
In the meantime, parents just want to know the medicine they need to keep their kids healthy will be available. Federico says even with the influx of foreign supply on the way, it will likely be well into next year before the shelves are fully stocked.
By the spring, maybe the summer, but over the winter, unfortunately, the supply will likely be limited.
And we'll have more on the medication shortage later on in the news hour.
Doctors across the country have been warning of a serious flu season, made even worse by the circulation of RSV and COVID-19. And it seems like many people in Thunder Bay have been following the advice of medical professionals and getting their flu shot. Jansen's pharmacy locations administered more than half of their total annual expected flu shots in the early release period alone. That was the time frame during which the vaccine was available only to the most vulnerable. It's now open to all Ontarians 6 months and older. Jansen's clinical coordinator, Greg Tinsley, says getting the shot will help alleviate the burden on the healthcare system.
In terms of Flu Watch, which is the federal government's surveillance program, they have increased numbers of people that are hospitalized, including pediatrics. There's just increased cases across the board. So it's incredibly vital to get the flu shot if you can. There are some people that can't, and the flu shot also, the people who can also assist people who can't be vaccinated.
Along with pharmacies, the flu shot is available at doctors' offices and the health unit's vaccine clinics.
Days after strongly recommending that Ontarians return to wearing masks inside, video has surfaced of Ontario's Chief Medical Officer of Health not sticking to his own advice. That's Dr. Kieran Moore watching a performance at a party celebrating Toronto's 50 most influential people with no mask in sight. Toronto Mayor John Tory also attended the event and shared photos of himself not wearing a mask either. Epidemiologist Dr. Christopher Labos says the messaging from public officials is critical.
We need to change the public messaging upon this, because this is what happens, right? You go to a public event, and even if you were inclined to wear a mask, if you see nobody else there wearing it, you start to feel odd and awkward. And you're like, well, I don't want to be the one who stands out, so you don't put it on. But if we can change that, if at least we can have, our public health leaders and politicians doing it, it normalizes the situation. And when people go to these parties or these events or these, press conferences or what have you, they'll be like, well, if everybody else is wearing a mask, I guess I should put mine on as well. I mean, it's surprising how much peer pressure plays a role even amongst adults.
Atikokan's new mayor and council were sworn in this week. Two-term councillor Rob Ferguson won the mayor's chair in last month's election, and he's now taking the reins from longtime mayor Dennis Brown, who chose to retire from politics. Jonathan Wilson reports.
It was bittersweet taking over from Mayor Brown.
Rob Ferguson knows he has some big shoes to fill as he replaces Dennis Brown as mayor of Atikokan. Brown spent 4 decades on the town council, including 25 years as reeve or mayor. But now that he's in his 80s, Brown decided it was time to take a step back.
And I've known Mayor Brown for for 50 years of my life, so I have a good relationship with Mayor Brown, and I would have never ran if Mayor Brown was going again, but since Mayor Brown decided not to go, I thought it was my time to step in and take the reins.
And Rob was on council for 8 years, and he certainly helped us out, and I'm glad he's the mayor now, because he'll certainly help Atikokan.
The new Atikokan Council was sworn in on Monday and includes 4 new town councillors and 3 veterans, including Ferguson. He says they have a good mix of young and old, and he wants to get all council members more involved in shaping Atikokan's future.
We're trying to find some efficiencies on the council side, and as well as transparency and accountability is what the residents wanted, and we want to move the town ahead for a new industry, kind of modernize things, and bring more people in town.
Ferguson is currently the senior manager of maintenance and production at the OPG power plant just outside Atikokan. He says he got the blessing of his employer to run for mayor and sees the 2 roles working hand in hand.
What's good for Atikokan is good for Atikokan GS and vice versa. So there's a lot of synergies working between the 2. I can bring a lot of good things to the town through OPG and vice versa for OPG from the town. So yeah, it's going to be busy.
And if things get a little too busy, Brown says his phone line is always open for Ferguson to call. Jonathan Wilson, TBT News.
Back here in Thunder Bay, a group of Indigenous students at Hammersholt is involved in an impressive project. The teens are building a tiny home behind the high school. It's a way to learn valuable trade skills that can be applied throughout their lives and taken back with them to their First Nations to help address housing shortages. Vasilios Bellows has the story.
It's nice to be like, hey, I'm 16 and me and my classmates did this. We're doing this. We're building a house, and lots of people don't get to do that in their lives.
These definitely aren't your average high school students at Hammersholt, as they're taking on and conquering an incredible challenge. It's called the KZ Lodge North program, which sees Indigenous students building a tiny home right behind their school. It's a way of teaching them important trade skills that they can bring into their careers if they choose the field, or back to their First Nations to create more affordable housing. It's made possible through funding from the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. The Lakehead Social Planning Council handles these dollars, with program manager Bonnie Krizawati explaining that many other groups have helped make this possible.
It's fabulous what's happened with Home Depot being able to provide funding for materials, Matawa. There's so many organizations, Smart Modular Canada, that have been involved that have just made this come to fruition. So it's heartwarming, and it's also extremely exciting.
Alternative secondary school support worker Tanya Moses has been an important part of the program, working with the students. Moses explains what this means for them, being able to see their hard work pay off.
For them to be able to see it materialize the way that it has, it allows them to have ownership. They know it builds confidence in, within themselves, and maybe a sense of pride also.
For the students themselves, they're learning skills both relevant to the trades and beyond.
Measure properly, and how to, cut lumber, how to know what lumber to get in the first place, and the differences between a lot of the tools that we were using, what's best for what, and just general teamwork as well. We learned to work better as a team since a lot of us didn't know each other before that, and it definitely improved our communication skills as well.
Organizers are still looking at options for the tiny home once it's completed, but the hope is to bring it to a Matawa community. Vasilios Bellows, TBT News.
Offering a new dining option for visitors to its cafeteria. Verde is the college's first 100% plant-based meal provider with an ever-evolving menu. It's a major milestone in the college's sustainability efforts. The ultimate goal is to reach net zero by offering plant-based options and promote healthy living. The packaging Verde uses is all compostable, which also helps with another one of the college's initiatives, to reduce on-campus waste. Director of Facilities Robin Gould explains how this all lines up with their objectives.
It aligns really well with the college's stance on sustainability. In April 2021, we signed the United Nations SDG Accord, which is 17 goals, and providing plant-based food alternatives for folks is something that aligns really well with that.
Works well with our sustainability. So Sodexo Canada has made a commitment to reduce our protein purchases by 20% by 2024. So a concept like this helps us.
Jewett adds it was a collaboration of partners that helped them achieve their goal. So far, Verde has received a warm welcome from college staff and students, as plant-based foods are something people have been asking for many years.
I would have liked to see those options back when I was in college.
Yes, me too.
Good to see. Well, Fiona, turning to the weather now, it was a little bit of a chilly one out there today.
Yes, it was. After hitting a low of -9 and wind chills of -15, we only warmed up a handful of degrees to -6 and a wind chill of -11 today. And that was with winds from the west 13 to 21 kilometers per hour and a few periods of some light snow. But to the west, those winds are really starting to kick up a little bit more today. In the afternoon, they were in the 40K range, causing snow and blowing snow to the west. In Fort Frances, they have wind chills at this hour of -19. Similar conditions in Kenora, Dryden, and up into Red Lake with that blowing snow. As we head eastward, a little bit warmer, Armstrong -8 and Greenstone -10 with much less wind, so the wind chill isn't as strong a factor. It feels more like about -16 at this time. Marathon -6, and Sault Ste. Marie out of the line of fire of those gusty winds moving through northwestern Ontario. So at this hour, their wind chill is sitting around -7, and they're under mostly cloudy conditions. No real snow as yet today, but that is going to change. Now, tonight, we're going to drop down to a low of -11, and wind chills will feel like -18 with winds up to 35 kilometers per hour. And yes, a little bit more snow could be falling. Nothing heavy for Thunder Bay. However, as we get into the weekend, those winds continue to blow and the air is coming in from the northwest. So those cold air is going to bring temperatures down as winds pick up. The wind chill will feel even colder regardless of how the temperatures warm as the snow moves further and is going to hit Sault Ste. Marie pretty hard starting tomorrow. And I'll have more details later on in the news hour.
Okay, thanks a lot, Fiona. Well, we told you a little bit earlier that more than 1 million bottles of children's pain medication will soon be made available. Good news for parents who've been desperately searching for it. After the break, we'll show you what Health Canada's chief medical advisor had to say about the situation. That's coming up right after the break.
Authorized for Canada is double what we would have seen last year.